I just want to gush a little bit about my book of the month for August. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's video is going to be a review adjacent look at my book of the month. This is something new that I would like to start doing. I haven't been in like a video form review space or even over on Before We Go blog for a little while. I've just not had the energy for it, but I do miss it. I do miss thinking critically about stories. So I'm thinking I'm going to start with something like a book of the month, where I do a little bit more of a review or in-depth discussion on the book that I enjoyed the most out of each given month. So we're going to start with August, and I'm going to be talking about Lady Tan's Circle of Women, written by Lisa C. I had a wonderful time with this book. This is based around the character of Tan Yunshin, who is a real-life physician, or was a real-life physician, during the Ming Dynasty in China. So this book made me go and have a look at who this character was, who it was based on, and I think that it's the beauty of something that historical fiction can do is, I personally, just like history goes in one ear and out the other, I don't retain a whole hell of a lot, but if someone presents it to me in an entertaining fiction way, I go, oh, okay, well, I wonder who that person was in real life. And it made me go and do that, which is already credit to the book and Lisa C's writing style, which is just fantastic. So if you're interested, this book is about Tan Yunshin, as I've mentioned, who grew up under the guidance of her grandparents, who were both medical practitioners, particularly her grandmother, who was the daughter of a physician. When the grandmother passed in real life, Yunshin was left with a lot of her medical journals, and you can actually go in and buy Tan Yunshin's medical works. It's called, or I don't know if it's like just a selection of some of the things that she was talking about, but it's called Miscellaneous Records of a Female Doctor, and that has been translated by Lorraine Wilcox and Yu Lu. Hopefully, I pronounced that correctly. This has had very real influence on how female patients are treated in today's world, and it was written over 500 years ago, which I think is just incredible. Lady Tan's Circle of Women was an incredibly immersive story of Tan Yunshin's life from childhood well into her adult years. Now, obviously, this is historical fiction, so creative liberties have been taken for the sake of entertainment, but I think that Lisa C has done a really good job of coupling historical accuracy with more entertaining nodes that will allow readers to go and question this woman's life. We follow Yunshin as she navigates the roles of women in 15th century China while also trying to push the boundaries within the confine of her home and also the societal norms that she is restricted by. The book opens up with a very young Yunshin who is being taught a lesson by her mother, known as Respectable Lady, about all the roles that she has to take as someone's future wife. And you'll get an understanding from these scenes as to what sort of role Yunshin needs to take throughout her life as someone's daughter and then as someone's wife, and being very much directed by the men in the life that she will have and will continue to have. We understand that her whole life has been planned from the moment of her birth, and as a woman is seen as somewhat less than her half-brother, who was born to a concubine rather than her actual mother. Her life, very early, we get this understanding that will be completely guided by the men around her, whether that be her father, her grandfather, or her future husband, with very little room to explore her own needs, wants, and desires. Now, I should say this next paragraph does get a little bit spoiler. It happens very early in the book, but if you don't want no spoilers, maybe go ahead and skip this video from this point on. But if you're okay with like slight spoilers, then carry on. When Yunshin's mother unfortunately passes due to not caring for her bound feet, which we do get a look of the culture of binding children, female children's feet, to be desirable for their husbands in this book, but her mother doesn't look after her feet. So very early on, we know that the mother has an infection and unfortunately passes due to that infection. Our main character, Yunshin, is then sent to live with her grandmother and grandfather, who will start to teach her the ways of medicine. Now, they both try and pull her in different directions. The grandfather wants to teach his style of medicine. Now, the way that men treated patients was very different to the way that women treat patients. A lot of male doctors weren't allowed to touch female patients in certain areas in certain ways, and that was left to female doctors. So the grandmother wants to take Yunshin under her wing and teach her the way of women's medicine, which Yunshin then goes and takes to quite well. This is something largely unheard of in a male-dominated industry. There is an argument in the beginning of the book between the grandfather and the grandmother about what sort of medicine and why certain medicines are considered dirty, or why practitioners of that medicine is considered dirty. And the grandmother's basically like, yes, well, if you're not going to help these women, who will? And has a bit of a back and forth. And that was an interesting conversation in itself. Throughout Yunshin's learning, she becomes friends, very good friends, and I would argue that it's sort of a soulmate situation. Now, I personally believe that soulmates don't necessarily have to be romantic. A soulmate friend in this particular book with a midwife's daughter called Mei Ling, and they grow up together. They are able to learn together in their various practices. So, Yun Xian's grandmother and herself learn a certain type of medicine, whereas midwife Shi and her daughter Mei Ling learn a different part of women's medicine. And they're able to learn together in their separate learnings and then grow up and start to discuss and push the boundaries of the patriarchal society that they're in very subtle and important ways. This, underlying it all, is a story of the importance of friendship and fundamentally women who work together to enhance their lives in a world that wants them to remain quiet, and being able to respectfully push boundaries in that world. And I thought that was very well done by the author here. I had a wonderful time with Lisa C's story. The prose was poetic. There is an abundance of culture and a lot of care taken for the history that she's trying to showcase, showing through this work. Now, I want to talk about my favorite aspect of this story, which is just that. It's the author's ability to couple the feeling of this world of oppression with the celebration of the small wins that each part of this book hold, that each part of Yunshin's journey unfolds as we follow her throughout her various stages of life. The world that they're in is objectively cruel to women, but I want to give a caveat to that, saying that that is my modern take on reading these pages. However, I'm not a 15th century Chinese woman who whose thought processes and traditions that are showcased in this book, they were normal to these women. They and expected of women of the classes of both Yunshin in certain aspects and Mei Ling in certain aspects. I think that Lisa C has done an incredible job of showing Lady Tan and her circle of women as they question gender roles and norms while also respecting that that is their place in the world that they're in. We, as readers, or I'll speak for myself, as a reader, could feel Yunshan really grow into her beliefs as she gets older, as she is touched by tragedy or illness or the illness of others. She gets called out for her hypocrisy as a woman of class, not thinking about the livelihoods and the different experiences of women who are seen as below her station. She learns about those circumstances. She does get defensive, but she does also ultimately take those teaching and use it as part of her learnings and the way that she then walks through life, and to move the women herself and the women around her forward. She can't let go of this need to care for other women when she can see that the care is just not being placed. She is very much able to respect those around her, see the classism at play, and try and nudge the edges of the expectations towards something more agreeable within, still remaining within the confines of their lives. I thought it was just excellent that we were able to understand the limitations that women in this particular society have, while also see those little ways where our character Yun Shin and Mei Ling and Mei Ling's mother and her grandmother were gently just being like, okay, what if we tried something different? And yes, men rule our lives, but who is going to look after the women here? Because they aren't doing it and they're not interested in doing it. We are looked down upon. We need to stop fighting each other so that we can move forward as a group. And it really is about that bringing together of these women. And you do see them fight each other. You do see the different expectations of someone like a Yun Shin who has come from money and an important family line, to even the concubines that their husbands have chosen to have children with. If their wives can't give them male children, they will employ concubines to make sure that their family line carries on. And there is a real divide here between their wives and the concubines, because the wives are seen as somehow less than if they're unable to produce a son, and the standing of the children and the women themselves. And I think that was just so well executed in this story. I also think that this book is able to showcase, and I touched upon this right at the beginning, what historical fiction can do for people like me who suck at retaining any sort of historical information. It's presented, like I said, in a very easy way that makes me want to go and learn about people like Tan Yushin, who I did. I went and had a look at who this person was and what their real life contributions were to modern medicine, and I thought it was just fascinating. That was my experience, and I guess my book of the monthly review slash discussion. I don't know if I can call it a review because there was no real critique in here, but that is up to, I guess, the viewer's interpretation of what a review is. But I had a wonderful time with it. This is my book of the month. I am looking forward to reading more of Lisa C's work, who I believe does write very much in a American slash Chinese history in her historical fiction. So I'm looking forward to picking up more and potentially learning something more from this author. If you've picked this one up, let me know what you think. If you're going to pick this one up, let me know what draws you to it in the comments down below. If you like the content, give one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will, and I will catch you in the next video. Ciao.